Good afternoon, everyone. Good to see you. It's a wonderful Sabbath today, and I enjoy seeing you all online. So, in today's message, I will go back in time about 22 years ago. In 2004, I went to the north of Norway in the autumn, or fall, they say in the United States. They say fall, but it was in the fall, and it was for 5 weeks. So, 5 weeks of Norway in the north of Norway. So you might ask, what did I do there? It was for a military exercise. I was a young man. I was 20 or 19 years old only, and it was a tough. It's a tough training. It's in the mountains of Norway. It's called mountain training. The reason we were there was for to learn to navigate or to learn the military, be soldiers in the mountains, not just. The Netherlands is a flat country. Just to stay there to do a mountain training wouldn't be possible. So we had to go to Norway. And this was a recurring training, military exercise. And if you look at a map, it's quite a tough country to operate in, especially during those days. The fall, it's a transitional period where initially it can still be mild temperatures, but later in the mountain training, we would have freezing temperatures. All of a sudden, it dropped the last week or so. I recall our backpacks became solid blocks of ice. Initially, we had a milder period with rain, and we were learning to be soldiers in the mountains, and all of a sudden, our backpacks were like solidly frozen. But it's quite a tough training. Initially, the first 3 weeks, it would be just navigating through the mountains without the tactical element to it. And then the last 2 weeks, the tactical element was added in the mix. And because I had that background, I like to be, I'm an outdoorsy person. In the past decade, even though I left the Marines, the Dutch Marines in 2009. The past decade, I still climb some mountains. I recall in 2017, I went to the Pen y Fen. That's not a very high mountain, but it's a mountain in Wales. And that one is 886 meters high. Oh, that's 2,907 feet. Also climbed the Scaffold Pike. Scaffold Pike is the highest mountain in England. Which stands at 3,209 feet. The Ben Nevis, you might have heard of that mountain. That's the highest mountain in Scotland. That's 1,345 meters, which is 4,413 feet. I also went to the Schneeberg in Austria, which is over 2,000 meters, 2,076 meters high, which is 6,811 feet. And I went to the Lomnicki Szczyt, which is a bit of a tongue twister, which is located in Slovakia. And that one is 2,634 meters, which translates into 8,642 feet. So these are not very high mountains, but I still like to do that. And it's still nice to do, just be in the mountains and challenge myself a little bit. So why did I recall or start off my message with talking about mountains, my experience in the mountains? Let's turn to Psalm 36 and verse 6. Psalm 36 and verse 6. Your righteousness is like the great mountains. Your judgments are a great deep. O Lord, you preserve man and beast. So God's righteousness is like the great mountains. These are great mountains. The ones I just listed off were not necessarily that great in height. If you look at the word great, the adjective in front of mountains, which describes the mountains, so these are great mountains, high mountains, is the word El. You probably know what the word El means in Hebrew. It can also be translated God. strength, power, mighty. So these are high mountains, godly mountains. So it's something that we need to, in a sense, we need to reach that summit in our lives. And it's a high summit, it's a high mountain. We need to reach the summit of Mount Righteousness. That's how I would like to title this message. Reaching the summit of Mount Righteousness. Now, what is righteousness? Most churches in this world wouldn't necessarily be able to give a definition to the word righteousness. They have a general, most people would have a general sense of the word, but what is the biblical definition of the word righteousness? In Psalm 119 and verse 172, the psalmist says, "My tongue shall speak of your word, for all your commandments are righteousness." So this is a high bar, and it's the commandments that we need to, keeping the commandments in a world that doesn't keep commandments, God's commandments, the 10 Commandments, is not easy. Most people want to stay in the plains, so to speak, in the lower altitudes. But we need to get to this high mountain, and it's Mount Righteousness. Keeping the commandments is like climbing a mountain. So how do we get there? How do we get to this incredible summit? This desire, the summit that even people in the world would still, if you would explain it to them, they would desire to get to that summit. They would have at least a feeling or a desire to get there. But how do we, as God's people, get there? So my first point, and how in order to how to get there, is seek expert guidance. Seek expert guidance. If you go to Acts 8 and verse 30, this is the Philip. I think he was still deacon at this point. Later on in the book of Acts, he's an evangelist. But Philip, it says in verse 30, "And Philip ran thither to him and heard him read the prophet Isaiah, and said, 'Understand you what you read?'" He's talking to the Ethiopian eunuch. And he said, how can I, except some man should guide me?" And he desired Philip that he would come up in his chariot and sit with him and then explain this particular passage in the book of Isaiah, because he didn't understand it. It was a passage that was a prophecy about Christ, which prophesied about Christ's first coming. Now, this is an interesting point. Like, if you go to the highest mountain in the world we know is Mount Everest. And if you go there, you cannot just go there without a guide. You cannot just, oh, you know what? Let's go there just by myself and just bypass everyone. And I think you even cannot do that legally, because you need to pay the government of Nepal a fee for summiting their mountain, because it's in their territory. So, but it's a very high mountain. It's a mighty mountain, and a lot of people die there or get injured, lose fingers, toes because of frostbite. So it's a mighty mountain. I think that people shouldn't really go there. Maybe God wants to walk there alone by himself, but people still try anyway. But it is something that is very difficult, and you cannot go there without an expert, with a guidance. And ministers can help us to understand the scriptures. And what I just did is, maybe for the first time, explain to you what the definition the real biblical definition of righteousness is. So I already gave you some expert advice, and I got that expert advice from someone else, from a Sherpa, so to speak, back in the day. And a Sherpa is a mountain guide, but it's a Nepalese mountain guide that guides people. These are locals. They are very experienced. They've been up the mountain many times. They guide mainly Westerners that have enough money up the summit. But you can liken them to ministers. There was one example, like, for instance, the Apostle Paul. You could call him a Sherpa back in the day. This is in 2 Corinthians 11, verse 23. He was commissioned to lead the church back in the day. And it says in 2 Corinthians 11, verse 23, "Are they ministers of Christ? I speak as a fool. I am more. In labors more abundant, in stripes above measure, in prisons more frequent, in deaths often. Of the Jews 5 times received I 40 stripes, save one. Thrice was I beaten with rods, once was I stoned, 3 times I suffered shipwreck." So this is and it continues. This is fastings. He is in perils in the sea, perils of his own countrymen. You can continue to read this resume, so to speak, of a Sherpa, but of an experienced minister. But of course, we need to. This is an interesting point, or an important instruction. You cannot just cling on to your Sherpa or your guide blindly. You cannot follow. So point 1A, which I already mentioned, or point 1 is seek expert guidance. But point 1B is seek expert guidance, but don't follow them blindly. This is the Apostle Paul speaking. "But I keep under my body and bring it into subjection, lest that by any means, when I have preached to others, I myself should be a castaway." I just saw that I forgot to jot down the actual scripture that says this, so he can do some homework there. But he says I think it's in one of the epistles to the Corinthians, he says, "But I keep under my body and bring it into subjection, lest that by any means, when I've preached to others, I myself, as an expert, as a Sherpa, so to speak, that helps people to get to the Mount Righteousness, should be a castaway." And castaway is the word eidokimos. That's the Greek word for it. And it means not standing the test, reprobate, rejected. So Paul realized, as a leader, as an expert mountain guide, so to speak, that helped people back in the day in the 1st century to reach the summit of Mount Righteousness, that he could die not reaching the summit himself. That's important for us to understand. You can seek expert guidance, but don't cling on to your Sherpa if it becomes clear to you that he is veering off, that he's not adhering to the high standards that a Sherpa, so to speak. You get my analogy? I'm pretty sure you do. If he veers off and starts to become lenient, or starts to become not cling to the high standard that a mountain guide needs to, especially in Mount Everest, in the Himalayas. It's a high bar that they need to continue to keep this high level of experience. In James 3, verse 1, this is an instruction to those that are teachers, and I remind myself now as well of this. In James 3, verse 1, it says, the Apostle James says, "My brethren, be not many masters, knowing that we shall receive the greater condemnation." Think of, for instance, King Saul. King Saul was a started off well. If you go back to First Samuel, he had a good start. He was little in his own eyes, and then slowly but surely he became corrupt and then couldn't really guide people in the right direction anymore as the leader of the ancient nation of Israel. And actually, if you look in, I looked it up today on YouTube. Now, first I Googled it, and then I got a YouTube video, and I would like you to watch this. It's only 30 minutes in length. And it says, or the title of it is "One Mistake Killed Everest's Greatest Sherpa." One mistake killed Everest's greatest Sherpa. And it's about Babu Chiri Sherpa. That's his name. And he made one little mistake, like in seemingly, a small mistake. He didn't even die on the summit. It was like in one of the base camps where he became slack. He failed to do something that you should always do in this at these heights, at these elevation level of high elevations, and he fell in a crevice, and he died all of a sudden. So it can happen to the best. So we need to keep that in mind as well. Like we have to, especially if we're leaders ourselves, we need to keep ourselves in check. And also if we've learned the truth from a Sherpa, but that Sherpa starts to veer off in a wrong direction, we need to recognize that and stop following him. Otherwise, we might die with him. And this is the second point, humility is essential to reach the summit of Mount Righteousness. That's my second point. Amos 4 and verse 13. Amos 4 and verse 13. For lo, he that forms the mountains and creates the wind and declares unto man what is his thought, that makes the morning darkness and treads upon the high places of the earth. The Lord, the God of hosts, is his name. So he created his mountains and he still treads on them. He treads, God walks on the high mountains of this. Of course, people won't see him do that, but apparently he likes to tread on the high mountains from time to time. So God is in a high elevation. God, of course, we know that God is love, and love is righteousness. Keeping the commandments is love. So he is on the high, and also if you consider the commandments are righteousness, which again the definition of righteousness is keeping the commandments. God gave the Ten Commandments from Mount Sinai, from a mountain, not from he didn't give them from a valley. And the people were on top, and no, it was people were in a valley, and God gave his commandments from a high mountain. In Psalm 113 and verse 5, who is like the Lord, our God, who dwells on high? So he dwells on high, who humbles himself to behold the things that are in the heavens and in the earth. So God is, if you think about it, it's an incredible statement here. God is a humble being. You would think that, so for us human beings to fall into a high-minded or prideful attitude, it's actually an incredibly foolish thing to do. And we do, because we are influenced by the prince of darkness, the prince of this world, the god of this world, Satan, and we can sometimes fall into an attitude of high-mindedness. But God himself is a humble being who humbles himself to behold the things that are. If you look at the word humble, it can be to depress or to lower oneself. So humility is, and it actually harkens back to the previous point. So, like I mentioned, an experienced Sherpa might actually, because of being so expert, start to think he is he's not in danger of falling or in danger of injuring himself or even dying on the mountain. And so the humility, or especially for leaders, but anyone, is key to reach the summit. You need to know your limitations. Third point is don't listen to the naysayers. Don't listen to the naysayers. People, a lot of ministers in this world actually would naysay, tell you that it's not possible to keep God's law. In Romans 6 in verse 1, it says, "What shall we say then? Shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? God forbid. How shall we that are dead to sin live any longer therein?" So that's Romans 6, and once again, Romans 6 and verse 1 and 2. There was already happening in the first century that there was a group of false teachers that said, I think it was the Nicolaitans did this. Book of Revelation warns about them as well, where they said that if you sin, the more you sin, the more God has to extend his forgiveness or his grace to you, and therefore then you grow in grace. If you sin, that's incredibly illogical. But still, that's people fell for it, and they would, in a sense, they would naysay. They would tell you, no, it's not possible to keep God's commandments and reach the summit of Mount Righteousness. In 1 John 5 verse 3, "For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not grievous." So Paul also already had probably encountered people that would preach, or false teachers that would preach that the commandments or keeping the commandments is not possible. It's grievous. It's impossible. It's too difficult. So he's countering this, and he says, no. These are naysayers. They will tell you that reaching the summit of Mount Righteousness is impossible. In Numbers 13 and verse 14, both chapters, you probably know the story. It's the scouts, 12 scouts. Each tribe provided a scout to go into the promised land and see what the land looked like, the inhabitants before actually conquering it. And 10 of them were naysayers, except for Joshua and Caleb. So you can see, I mean, these were supposed, quote unquote, Sherpas, and 10 of them said, no, you cannot get to the summit. This is from a mountain mountain website where you can find articles. It's called 8summits.com. It's an interesting quote. There will be people who tell you that you can't accomplish your goals. It's too hard, too risky. You set your sights too high, they will tell you. It's not possible. I hate those words. Follow the advice of Mark Twain, who said, "Keep away from small people who try to belittle your ambitions. Small people always do that, but the really great make you feel that you, too, can become great. Never allow yourselves to be fenced in by the doubts and expectations of others." And the world, I mean, pretty much in general, the whole world, whether it's religious people or people that aren't religious, they will tell you keeping the commandments is impossible. You cannot reach that summit. Philippians 2 verse 14. And I wrote, they didn't put the quotes down, but you can write them down. These are encouraging scriptures that will counter the naysayers. Philippians 2 verse 14 and Philippians 4 verse 13 are very encouraging scriptures. I would like you to look at them in your notes, or jot them down in your notes and look at them yourself. But it says about the book of Philippians, I'm just mentioning those two scriptures from the book of Philippians because it's commonly known as the Epistle of Joy. It is one of the most uplifting and positive letters in the Bible, written by the Apostle Paul from a dark prison cell. It transcends difficult circumstances to offer a timeless message of hope, resilience, and unwavering peace. That's the sources that describe the book of Philippians is core Christianity. But it's a high mountain that we are continuing to climb. And the naysayers will continue to tell us that we can't get there. Again, that was the third point. Brethren, we are followers of the ultimate mountain guide, the ultimate Sherpa, so to speak, Jesus Christ. We must get to the peak of this breathtaking mountain, Mount Righteousness. Acknowledge the dangers, the obstacles, and the risks. Seek expert guidance, but never follow them blindly. Realize that humility is essential to walk with God on His mountains. And please don't listen to the naysayers. Keep pressing onward, persevering every day, going towards the top of that ultimate summit. And imagine experiencing the deeply satisfying peace that will fill our hearts once we've reached the amazing summit of Mount Righteousness.